Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. This is Julia Talbot at the Department of Family and Support Services, and I would like to welcome so many of you this morning. Let's see, 101 people are signed up. So, and in the chat, in the room, so to speak, to our Department of Family and Support Service Youth Services Mentoring RFP. We are so excited to talk about this opportunity today, and I can't wait to get started. First, there's going to be a little housekeeping, as there always is. Due to the volume of participants and just DFSS standard, we're putting you on mute. If you have a question, please put it in the question box. If you're having a problem with your a technical issue, please put that in the question box and we will try to address it. We're asking everybody to submit questions via the question box, and we will respond to the questions after going through the slides. We usually take we kind of go to a midway point, and we break before I start talking about the technical aspects of the RFP, and then we'll take questions there, and then we can take questions at the end. Here is our agenda for this morning. Today, I am being joined by my totally awesome coworkers, Ms. Lisa Hampton, who I believe is the Director of Prevention and Intervention at the Youth Service Division, Monica Dunleavy-Gerster, who is a Youth Service Coordinator, I believe, and John Weber, who is, I don't always know. John, do you want to tell me your title right now? Unmute, John.
Senior Director of Operations for the Youth Services.
Senior Director of Operations. I can't ask for a better team to join me. So between them, there's like so much knowledge about everything youth on every conceivable level. So I'm going to turn the presentation over to Lisa, but you can see here just from the agenda, one last word, that we're going to be going through most of these little bullets, which are not round. And then we'll break at the timeline part for questions, and then we can break afterwards to talk about after the technical assistance process for more questions. Just so that you know, and I'll repeat this a couple of times today, this is being recorded. The recording will be available on the DFSS YouTube channel. A link to that channel will be posted at the DFSS website. Probably the team will send out the link when it is available to you if you are an attendee. We take all of the questions that are asked today and the answers, and we put those into an amendment document, which is posted on the e-procurement application page. That is the only place those questions are going to be posted, though. We don't post them anywhere else. We at DFSS, our operational standard is that we try to post information like that in one place, so that if we ever have to pull it or make corrections or stuff like that, we have a little bit of document control going on there. But just so that you know, this is being recorded. I think you have to click on something saying that you agreed to that, and that the webinar, the recording is going to be posted on the DFSS YouTube channel. The link is on the DFSS website. Give us a day or two. It takes us a minute to process those files and get them posted. So the YouTube channel you will not find this webinar on the YouTube channel until probably early next week. Just to say, it might get up there tomorrow, but I really doubt it. It will most likely get up there on Monday or Tuesday. And with that, I would like to turn this over to Lisa so we can talk about this really exciting opportunity for mentoring and for providing the youth of the city of Chicago with services that will benefit them and help them grow into productive and happy adults. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia, for your amazing introduction. And thank you all for joining us this morning. As Julia said, we're very excited about being able to share information about the mentoring RFP, some of the background. We're going to walk through the entire RFP, some of the background reasonings behind some of the elements in the RFP, and as Julia stated, give you some time in between to ask questions. In addition to this, if people have additional questions, Please note that I am the main contact for this RFP, and all questions for me should also be sent in by email format, and that is just for our own tracking purposes and to ensure equity in our process. Next slide. Want to run through the timeline. This is, once again, this RFP was released last week. We are holding a webinar today, and it is due October 12th. It is due October 12th, Central Standard Time by noon. If you click and try to send this at 12:01, your RFP will be rejected by the system. So I just want to stress to people, and this is sort of going to be the theme for me in this session, is to start early, save often. Do not wait to the last minute. Do not wait to 2 days before. There's a lot of technology involved in being able to get this posted, and we want to ensure everybody has a chance to submit an application. And lastly, contract start dates are January 1 of 2023. No problem. Keep going. The purpose of this RFP is the Department of Family and Support Services seeks qualified respondents to implement in-school and out-of-school mentoring programs for youth ages 12 to 24 in Chicago who are at risk of not transitioning successfully into adulthood. This RFP does require cohort-based trauma-informed mentoring. We'll go into a little bit of that. And one of the significant changes is that it is 45 hours annually. So there is an expectation that you will serve a young person for the entire year. That includes the summer. And I'm gonna also stress that throughout the entire presentation. And this is really focused on youth who are in need, who have complex needs, and we'll get into the service population. Next slide. The goal, as we've already stated, is really to organize, is to implement the in-school and out-of-school programming. And I think our ultimate goal, I just want to stress here, is that we hope, the goal is that young people are engaged and with mentors, build in a safe space, build a strong relationship with a caring mentor, and increase their social and emotional competencies. And so that is the goal of our mentoring program, and that will be the focus of our performance outcomes and the work that we will, with respondents who receive an award, that we will focus in on for this mentoring RFP. Next slide. So what does our current mentoring program look like? I want to stress, for those of you who are current providers, once again, I just will say, please read the entire RFP. It may seem very similar to what you're doing, but it is not. And we want to ensure that people understand that. And so the most important thing I can stress is definitely attending this webinar is a good first step. Secondly, making sure that everyone who's going to be contributing and writing to your RFP literally reads it all the way through. We often know that different people contribute to different parts of the RFP, and it has to be really clear that everyone understands the nuances that we have in this particular version. So our current state in the RFP, for those of you currently doing, is we are currently funded for 4,197 mentoring slots. And in this last year, we served over 5,300 young people. Programs were offered in 34 community areas. That's one of the major shifts in this RFP you'll see, for 5 hours a month, utilizing a cohort style approach. And then 89% of those participating youth had heightened exposure to violence. Some of the key things in our current state of programming that we're doing is the 5 hours a month. It's a group or cohort component. It's focused on developing skills or training, addressing youth social and emotional needs, and incorporating positive values, principles, and practices. The other piece I would stress that is different here is the current state is also only school year, and that is a significant shift in the new version. Next slide. So what does this new version look like? Based on an extensive research and best practices, and also just given the needs that we saw through the city of Chicago, where there is a strong focus on enrollment of underserved youth. And so we are seeking respondents to be able to not only successfully recruit, but retain youth who are what is considered underrepresented in our current mentoring programs. I will list them all here in future slides. I will just refer to them as our targeted population. But that is youth with disabilities, youth who are English or second language learners, youth who are enrolled in Chicago public school option schools, youth who are experiencing homelessness, who are or unstably housed, youth who are in foster care system and or transitioning out of care, pregnant or parenting, involved with the justice system, and opportunity youth who are out of school and not working. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about this population and what those means. I think we've already gotten some questions by email about what does it mean, what are some of the terms in a sense of what does that mean for the population. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that. The other big shift is we are moving away from community areas. The expectation is people will service a healthy Chicago equity zone. And that is in the RFP, there is extensive information about what that is, and that is based through the current plan through the Chicago Public Health Department, but it is the focus for most of our RFPs that we have put out in the last couple of months here at the Youth Services Division. But there is, the expectation is that individuals will pick one of the zones, or you can apply to many, just everyone is a single application. And they are north, central, northwest, west, far south, near south, and southwest. Next slide. The other biggest change, once again, is that we are requiring respondents to offer programming year-round. This is not optional, it is a requirement. Programs can occur during in-school or out-of-school hours, and it will include and should also consider including evenings and weekends and during the summer months. Part of the reason why we reached this decision was because it was clear that having an in-school program only very much limited our ability to reach youth in our youth who were out of school or who had other commitments, either working and or other needs. And I think as a youth service division, we service youth up to the age of 24. And we felt strongly to, based on the philosophy and the principles here, that we also need to ensure that we're able to service that population. So in addition to the out of school focus hours, evenings and weekends, summer is a required programming has to occur over the summer. In addition to that, we want to make sure that people understand that in your responses, that it needs to be clear that what are you serving, whom are you serving, and what time, and how your programming will be able to accommodate those summer months. The other thing was to focus on programming and developing appropriate curriculum. So once again, this is not new for current providers, but because of the age descriptions that we've provided in this RFP, we want to make sure that people are thinking about picking a trauma-informed, SEL focus. Development is really huge in making sure that they are picking age-appropriate curriculum for the different populations that you choose. Next slide. The other piece that we will be prioritizing is this continuous improvement or focus on using data to make programmatic decisions. So we will be requiring all awardees to attend data-driven sessions throughout the life of this contract and to build peer-to-peer support and implement changes to programs. That will look like very different from our learning cohort structure in that we will be looking at data across all program sites. We will be looking at ensuring that people are meeting the needs, i.e. the service population needs, that people are looking at potentially how to use the data to make changes in their programming, and very much a focus on making sure that we are linking activities that you are doing to the overall outcomes that are being and the goal that was stated in this RFP. That is going to be a different shift for a lot of folks, but that is the path DFSS has been on for the last 6 years, and the focus and being able to change these sessions to be more data focused is going to allow us as DFSS staff to be able to support you and to work with you as partners in ensuring that we're having the best services provided to young people, but also allows for you to do systematic changes and more quickly, and to ensure that we're doing the best programming based on what we're hearing and what the data is telling us. That also leads into the fact that this is going to be very youth-centric. And so it is very important, particularly as we've changed the population and changed the ages, that there is a very clear response and very clear indication that there is a youth-centered, that this is a youth-centered mentoring program that provides authentic and ongoing opportunities for youth input and voice. So we want to really see that people are allowing young people to determine and to voice what their thoughts are, what their needs are, and that there's then also seeing how those things are being implemented by respondents, or how they will be implemented by respondents. The other piece, which is always something that we focus on here, is support and training for mentors. Once again, as we really focus in on the data-driven response, sort of the data-driven performance measures, we really want to make sure that respondents understand that that we are seeking programs that have extensive training and supports for mentors, which includes a description of the program purpose, the target youth population, and procedures. And so we don't just want people just to hire folks and just have volunteers. We want to understand, and we want people to really understand that the focus on training for mentors is very essential to ensure that there is continuous improvement, data improvement, and a focus on young people's voice. And so very much making sure that in your responses that is something that people have a very clear plan in place that they can execute. Target population. The mentoring program, we intend to, to serve we are focused on the entire city. And that is through the health equity zones. Eligibility for this program is for Chicago residents who are between the ages of 12 to 24. That is a shift from our previous RFP. Who have assigned consent from a parent or adult, who are under the age of 18, or for those over 18 that they have a consent on file. At least 70% of the program youth must identify with at least one of the following populations as described below. I want to say two things before I sort of get into what this looks like. We are not saying that you cannot serve people outside of this group, but 70% of your population must come from one or a multitude of these categories. We are not saying that you have to just pick one. We're not saying you have to pick all. We are just saying that you have to document and be able to recruit and retain 70% from the following group. And so I want to be really clear about that. Youth with disability, we are using the standard through the mayor's office for people with disabilities, the standard definition under the ADA of what disability is. I'm happy to send that out to folks, but that is going to be a self-identifier for young people. Youth who are English as a second language learners, once again, that is the self-identifier. Youth who are enrolled in Chicago public CPS option schools. Youth who are experiencing homelessness and are unstably housed. As we get into the recruitment portion, the Chicago Public Schools does have an office for students in temporary living situations. We anticipate, or we hope, that many of you, if that is the population you plan to serve, that you will be build a relationship or be able to indicate in your RFP how you are going to be able to recruit from that population, either through CPS and or through DFSS's department or homeless unit. Youth in the foster care system and or transitioning out of care, and then youth who are pregnant or parenting, youth who are justice involved. I want to spend a little bit of time explaining what that means. So we just put parole and probation. Justice involved youth can be from individuals who are at the Department of Juvenile Justice. They can be at Cook County Correction. They can be coming through adult probation. They can be coming through juvenile probation. They can be individuals who have been arrested. And so it is, keep in mind that we are serving a population 12 to 24. And so we consider individuals in that age group to still meet the youth criteria. So you may have to think more broadly about how you're going to recruit if you choose youth who are justice involved as a population. And then opportunity youth, those are youth age 16 to 24 who are out of school and not working. Once again, many of these overlap. Many of these are pretty broad as a population. We're not saying that there are not other populations you can serve. You can serve youth who experience high violence or trauma. You can serve youth who are displaying behavioral issues, youth who are having other issues at home. We're not saying that they're excluded. What we're saying though is 70% of the population must come from 70% of your participants must come from these populations. Next slide. Program requirements, once again, that we are requiring that you implement a trauma-informed mentoring program. We are asking that you include your curriculum in this application. We are requiring that programming be offered year-round. Once again, it's going to be 45 hours. Part of your application questions will be to be able to tell us how you plan to, what that looks like, and what that looks like and how that will be offered, particularly over the summer months. Programming can occur during in-school or out-of-school. There is a preference for us here, just for full transparency, and out-of-school programming, which will include, and if you're going to include evening and weekends, make sure that that is also very clearly stated in your application responses. They're conducting rigorous outreach and engagement to specific youth populations. As we've stated before in our previous slide, the 70% is critical and a huge part of this RFP focus for us. And so we want to be very transparent that recruitment and engagement, long-term retention is going to be really critical as well. So being able to show that you understand the populations and you have a very detailed, rigorous outreach and engagement plan will be necessary in your responses as well. Trauma-informed curriculum, as we stated already, making sure that it's age appropriate. We are asking people to select what age groups that you're going to serve. We would like details in regards to if you pick 18 to 24, what activities are you looking at in your cohort design? That's going to look really different when you're talking about young people who are 12. And so we also want to ensure that people are picking curriculums that are going to be able to be age appropriate for the ages that you select. And once again, we keep stressing it because we want to be clear. It's very important to us that youth will receive 45 hours annually, which will include, it is required, it is not optional, summer time. Next slide. For the 70% recruitment, we've provided and recommended a list of individuals in the RFP for folks to review. This is not an exhaustive list. This is literally just a list of recommendations where we know populations are, and that we understand these are key relationships that you should be thinking about and exploring and be able to articulate in your RFP to help ensure those things. Once again, this is recommended. but we want to be able to understand that people understand if they're saying or picking a certain population. We want to understand what that recruitment will look like, particularly with and where those individuals will be connected through as well. Next slide. Program overview. So we are going to be asking people in the application questions for you to pick the age group that you plan to serve. The age groups are divided accordingly: 12 to 15, 16, 17, 18 to 24. You can pick one, you can pick two, you can pick all three. It's really your choice. But please note that whatever age group you pick, that you have to be able to explain and be explicit about the curriculum alignment and program activities that are age appropriate. Program hours, once again, in school or out of school time, you can choose one or both. For that, staff to youth ratio, as always, is 2 to 30. And then with an additional cohorts, as you add it, or it should be 1 to 15 increments. So to be clear, you can add young people, as you add young people in increments of 15, we expect to have an additional staff added, or not additional staff, but that you should plan your staffing patterns based on those numbers. Program recruitment, 70% of youth identified will be with at least one of the targeted populations listed in the target population slide. Once again, it's 70%. We want to be really, really clear. Doesn't exclude other people, doesn't exclude individuals who we previously served, youth who are exposure to violence, those sorts of things. But our focus for this is a 70% recruitment is the goal. That is what we are looking for. The goal for this RFP was to be more inclusive, and I think part of the population recruitment piece is allowing us to do that. So we're not excluding individuals, we're actually opening the pool once again beyond just in-school youth, but also beyond youth that we previously had in our mentoring RFP. Trauma-informed curriculum, and then the 45 hours requirement. Next slide. Respondents will recruit, hire, and manage program staff, as I stated before, using the 1 to 15 staff to youth ratio. Program staff, we are, I believe, asking people to upload a job description. As well, you should be thinking about staff that are positive and enthusiastic, civic-minded. I also would say staff that enjoy working with young people. I know that sounds weird, but it is not necessary. It is something people should gauge when they're trying to think about, particularly because there's such an emphasis on the role of the mentor. This really is going to come down to picking the right staff to ensure that they're able to engage with young people, to help to ensure that they're able to retain them in programming and to have positive outcomes. So it seems intuitive, but it is, but I will say, making sure that in addition to picking and hiring staff that have a youth background or understand group facilitation or SEL functions, just picking individuals who actually want to engage with young people would be helpful too. Some of their duties, we want to be really clear. Once again, there is a focus on data, very clearly is on the administrative functions, such as data entry and data collection, and making sure that there is a process and some accountability within your organization about how those things will be gathered and how they will be collected. And then preferences will be given to agencies who hire program staff with experience with youth development, youth education, and out of school time, and those who come from the communities in which the program is located. So once again, we have moved to these health equity zones, making sure is there some sort of process or ability for you to leverage individuals within the healthy equity zones to be part of your programming staff. Next slide. Thank you. Just some housekeeping notes here within our RFP. Prior to the program start date, staff must have their federal fingerprint background check done, the Illinois mandated reported training certificate. That requirement has changed to every 6 years now and then CPR and first aid is every 2 years. So once again, you cannot start your program until, if you have staff, for those who are awarded, these are a must-have in order for you to be able to start recruitment and basically to start actually meeting with young people in your programming. And then program staff will be required to, once again, participate in these DFSS-sponsored learning meetings. These also could be data meetings and delivering all the necessary trainings. As usual, we as partners in this endeavor with you will also be helping to ensure that we're providing training on things such as city span. We will be doing city span training every 6 months. Hopefully we won't see a lot of turnover, but just to ensure that people understand what those requirements are. We will be supporting any new sharing best practices in youth development and out of school time field, and then any pertinent like youth development issues or challenges. We want to ensure that, once again, that we are working to share best practice, share professional development opportunities in the field, so that we ensure that mentors are having the best experience with young people. Next slide. Mentoring program procurement, procedure requirements. Some of the programmatic changes, our agencies are required to notify DFSS, the coordinator, as well as myself, of any changes to staff, facility location, or work plan in writing within 7 business days of change. This has always sort of been something we've sort of, done, but not really per se enforced. And we want to be really clear that any changes to programs we need to be notified, just because of the nature of the work here. And then also, agencies are required to have a written procedure for identifying and reporting suspected child abuse or neglect. Agencies are also required to have a written emergency procedure for a lost child and or a major minor injury, and written safety facility evaluation procedure. Once again, those are things that we know most people have, but we want to be explicit here that those are things that we are requiring. And then and then if there's any closeout procedures that we'll need to follow in the case of we have to terminate, or or someone rescinds their grant, we want to ensure that there is a program closeout procedure in place, as well as to how that happens within your organization. Next slide. Performance goals. So we really tried to be really mindful about picking things that we think really relate back to our goal, as I stated, but also trying to be really mindful about what are ultimately the things that we want to be able to capture. And so for us, 80% of youth will report a positive relationship with their mentor. That is really the goal of mentoring program, is we want to make sure that mentors are having a positive impact on young people, helping them sort of steer them towards adulthood, helping them make life decisions as well. And so 80% of youth will report a positive relationship with their mentor. 80% of youth will report a strong relationship with peer and mentor community. 80% of youth will report growth in their social and emotional competencies, and 85% of youth will report feeling safe in the program. These outcomes will be measured in partnership with the staff here at DFSS through surveys and other opportunities. And so for those who are awarded respondents, we will get into more about what that looks like, but those are the outcomes that we are capturing here at DFSS. That is our performance goals. Other things that we will be looking to capture within CitySpan is that 90% and CitySpan is our database system. For those of you who have not had a contract with the city, or with the Youth Service Division, we use CitySpan as our database system. Other divisions within DFSS use different things. We use CitySpan. And 90% of youth slots will be filled at any given time. 70% of youth will meet the target population criteria. So once again, Your recruitment and retention planning responses are going to be really critical here to make sure that you have a plan in place to be able to meet the 90% youth slots to be filled at any time, and that 70% of the youth will meet the target population criteria. 90% of youth will attend 45 hours of group mentoring annually. And then we will also capture, but it's a percentage of youth who are referred to other services, for example, mental health, behavioral, school re-engagement, food access. I want to stress clearly here that this we are just going to capture a percentage in city span. It is not a requirement per se of this program, but we know oftentimes because of the nature of the relationship between the mentor and the mentee that they will oftentimes come to them with other things outside of the cohort to say, I need support in this, and we want to make sure that we capture your good work. And so this is really about us being able to capture your good work outside of just the cohort structure. But if you are connecting young people to other services, we also want to be able to capture that as well. So I just want to elevate that here. Next slide. So what is the guidance for this? This goes into the Healthy Chicago Equity Zones. Once again, we are not asking you to respond by a community area. We are asking you to respond by to pick and select a Healthy Chicago Equity Zone to provide your mentoring services. I say that up front because as you respond to the questioning and the application questions around Healthy Chicago Equity Zones, please keep in mind that you are applying for a zone, not just a community area. So your responses should be about the zone, not just, we're just going to serve this one community. We want to see that you are serving and have a plan to be able to provide services for young people in the zone. In addition to that, individuals that you can recruit within the Healthy Chicago Equity Zone can live and or attend school in that zone. We also want to be really transparent about that as well. So respondents must indicate, you have to indicate which Healthy Chicago Equity Zone you're going to choose. For every application, you can only pick one zone. I also want to be clear. So once again, the zones are listed here. You have to submit one application for each health equity zone for which you wish to apply, indicating which age groups and program specialty areas that they will serve within that health equity zone. So for example, if you want to have 3 applications and you pick West, Far South, and Near South, in each of those, you have to indicate what the age groups are and if they will be in or out of school and what that structure will be. Do not assume that if you write it in one, that it is applicable to the other 3. Everyone is a standalone application. So I want to be really transparent about that. Respondents can only apply for a health equity zone in which they can demonstrate a physical address. Once again, this is about being able to provide young people with services in a hyper-local environment. We do not want young people to be sort of traveling across zones to be able to get services. So we need to know that you're going to be able to establish an address within the health equity zone that you pick. Once again, multiple applicants by the same agency for the same health equity zone will not be considered. So you can't have 3 applications for the West zone. That is not, that's, you need to, if you want to apply to multiple zones, once again, each one is its own application. Respondents seeking funding from multiple sites, once again, are required to apply for each zone separately. Next slide. This is just a lovely chart of the actual equity zones and the areas. This is also listed in the RFP. We also have a table and all the zones in the community areas on page 17. It's table 4 and it's under section G, application guidance for respondents. So if you're in the RFP, this is listed on page 17. Next slide. We want to give an example of what we anticipate based on numbers from our mentoring program in the past as to what we anticipate youth slots will be by zone and how many potential applicants we will look to award per zone. Once again, this is just guidance for folks, but we want to give people we wanted to be transparent about what we thought based on the data and what we know and where we know young people might be. And so this is just, once again, it's we're looking to ensure geographic equity. So we are looking to balance the youth populations, and we are very much, once again, wanting to really focus in on making sure that we are looking at not just traditional in-school mentoring programs, but really an emphasis on the out-of-school programming and the target population. Budget proposal. We provided for you in this RFP a budget sample for people to be able to look at. And part of that was because budgeting, it is the one area I will say we tend to have the most interesting responses to. So one, I just want to stress to people, particularly those of you who are already or current providers, do not use a current budget to submit for this. We have provided a budget form as part of this application process. That is the form you should use. And there is a reason for that. So if you currently have a budget, do not submit that budget. You need to use the budget form that has been attached and has been linked to this application. So I want to stress that as well. If you're applying, once again, the rate for per youth is $2,300. Your minimum RFP requirement is 30 youth. That is the minimum. The anticipated cost, once again, our average, just basic award for 30 youth is $6,900. Once again, you are telling us how many young people you think you can serve, what that budget looks like. Please note that whatever budget you submit is not a guarantee that that is if you are chosen for an award, that is the award amount and or the slots you will get. So I just want to also be really transparent about that. What we want you to be able to demonstrate is that being able to think about what the needs are for the young people and being able to very clearly articulate how you are going to be good stewards of dollars awarded from the city. So we have provided a budget proposal with some information. I strongly urge people, particularly if you are not the person who's going to fill out the budget, please ensure that whoever is going to complete other parts of this, particularly the financial part, that they read the RFP and they look at this budget proposal that we've provided for you. It is very imperative that you have very clear descriptions about what you are spending the money on. As well, and in this, and so the budget sample is really for your benefit and for your team's benefit to ensure that you can submit a strong budget proposal as part of your application. Next slide. The terms of this contract is January 1, 2023 through December 31, 2024. As always, we always have an option for a one-year extension that is determined by DFSS. And that is based on need. So it is a 2-year contract with the option of a 1 year, but that option is determined by DFSS. It is required for indirect costs, will be capped at 15% per application. Once again, if you use the right budget form attached to this form, it's going to help you figure out how to get to 15%. And all respondents must be able to demonstrate a 15% in-kind match. Budgets should be allocated and looked at for 1 year or 12 months of service. And then cost categories are attached as budget instructions in every RFP. So once again, please use the form that is attached to this application. Use reasonable cost questions on the applications to discuss how you will determine the costs reflected in the budget. So once again, don't just upload your budget. There is an actual application question where we ask you to basically define how you got to the cost in your budget. Please use that opportunity to tell us how you determine the cost and what that looks like. So just uploading the budget alone is not enough. There is an actual question about reasonable costs that we want to make sure people also answer. Common errors and mistakes. Fringe, once again, please check your calculations. I think the form it does have that ability to do that as well, but we just want to make sure people understand and have someone review the application as it relates to fringe supplies. They're also frequently over or under or over budgeted, which once again, when we think about reasonable cost, just trying to be clear about how do you get to the cost related to supplies. Making sure your job description titles and your job description uploads have the same title. It's, once again, it seems really easy, but we see this a lot where people will have titles within the RFP, and then the job description they upload is not the same. Also, please have a brief description of the job in the budget document itself, if you haven't discussed it in the application, and there is room to discuss it in the application as well. Put your budget in the appropriate column. Once again, please make sure people understand there is a column that is for the city share. There is a column for other share, or other, meaning that is not the portion that the city will pay. And then there is a third column, which is a total. What we see people do is oftentimes put the wrong dollars in the wrong column, which then do not equal up to what you indicate at the front of the application as to what your budget request is. Show your match. Once again, I think the budget, in the way it's set up, allows you to do that pretty simply, but we just want to be transparent about it. And lastly, as always, read the budget instructions carefully. As I said before, if you are not the person completing the budget, I strongly suggest that if you are giving this off to another department or unit, that they read this portion of the RFP and read the instructions that are provided with the budget. Next slide. How are we going to determine awards for this? So this part of the slides are on the evaluation process, which is within your RFP, starting on section 2. Starting on, in my copy, page 19, but it's under the B evaluation process. So I'm not going to read all of these. Once again, you should read the entire RFP. One of the questions in our RFP application is that you or whoever is submitting this RFP has to certify that they read the entire RFP. I'm just going to highlight things that we know are really, we want to stress based on other RFPs we've seen in responses for over the last couple months here at the Services Division. You really have to demonstrate a clear understanding of the target population, including their strengths, assets, needs, and challenges. In addition to that, you have to be able to situate that within the healthy equity zone. So I just want to be very clear about that. That is something that we want. That is something that we want to be able to clearly see you demonstrate in that ability. There's also the department, along with the city, has a strong commitment to equity, and so there are several questions about a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. And so making sure that you're able to answer those questions very clearly. The other thing I would say, just in general, about all of the selection criteria, not only just here in community involvement, but across the board, is do not assume we know anything about your agency. Do not assume Monica, whom you may currently be your youth service coordinator, is going to be reading your RFP. You do not know that. Do not assume anything. So you have to be very explicit in your responses. You cannot say statements like, as you know, we do whatever. You do not know that the reader knows that. So this section in particular, you may be a organization that's already considered or serving in a diversity, equity, inclusion, access role, but you need to be able to demonstrate that within your responses here. So I just want to be 100% transparent. Don't assume the reader is not going, the scorer is not going to go out and do extra research. We're not going to go to your website. We're not going to clarify anything. We're going to read what you put on paper. And so if you are an organization that is a diversity forward organization, you still need to be able to demonstrate that in your responses in this section. So I just want to highlight that. Next slide. Organizational capacity is the other, once again, I'm going to just really emphasize two things here. Fiscal controls, and program expenditures. We need to know that you have the capacity to keep track of your expenses, have fiscal controls, and be able to adequately submit invoices monthly. That is something that, particularly as we move into the next year, that we definitely want to be able to ensure that people have the ability to do that. The other piece that I will highlight here is the adequate human resource capacity to hire and manage staff. So it's hire, manage, and retain staff, but also the training for staff. So that is something I just want to elevate to ensure that you are aware in regards to your responses here. Next slide. Strength of proposal section. The biggest thing I will stress here is being able to do the 45 hours and what that 45 hours looks like, and being able to be able to flush out what your schedule will look like, but also that it's age appropriate based on the curriculum that you're choosing here. The other piece I will highlight is the third bullet on here, which is have an effective approach to identifying and retaining program participants. We want to be able to know that your organization has a strong understanding of the populations, but also has a mechanism to be able to recruit and retain that population as well. So that is something that we will be looking closely at in the responses. Next question, next slide. Performance management and outcome. And the biggest piece is we want to show, once again, we are an outcome driven organization here at DFSS through our commitment to outcomes process that we've gone through the last almost 6 years. And because of that, we need individuals to show either a strong past performance against the outcome goals. If you're a current provider, we want to know what are your current goal, what are your current performance metrics. And if you're not, we want you to be able to show that you can have performance metrics from a similar program to mentoring. We want to know that people have experience using data to inform continuous improvement. What we don't want is for people to run a mentoring program and then say, oh, we knew we had challenges, but we never changed those things. We want people to indicate where and how you've been able to use data to make changes in your programming over time. So those are the two things I will elevate here. Next slide. Response, reasonable cost, budget justification, and leverage of funds. Once again, I think that you have the fiscal capacity to be able to execute this contract. For those of you who have done business with the city, you know that as you start a contract with us, it does take some time to be able to get reimbursed for that first time. So this is the place where you need to be able to tell us, if you're not reimbursed for 2 months, 3 months, do you have the fiscal capacity to be able to do that? And what does that look like? What and how are you going to leverage other funds and in-kind contributions to support the total program and administrative cost? And then how are you implementing sort of cost and funding request as it relates to, particularly to paying to the financials, but also human resources? How are you going to pay for staff? What does that look like? So those are all the things that are within this section, but those are the things we definitely want to highlight. Once again, all the details about these requirements and our selection criteria, this is what we are looking at in order to evaluate every application that comes to us, is in the RFP under section 2, under the section called evaluation process. I strongly urge you, as I've said multiple times, read the entire RFP, but particularly this section and the application questions, so you have a very clear understanding about what and how we are evaluating every application that comes to us. Next slide. All of the attachments. Here's another thing I would say. It's a very long list. Once again, this is why we say start early, save often. If you are going to do multiple applications, please understand that you must attach these documents to every application. Once again, every application is going to be read by different folks. So you cannot apply for 3 health equity zones and say in one, oh, well, all my other attachments are in the North Center, just go to that. We're not going to do that. You must attach documents to every application that you submit. And so I want to be really clear. It may take people some time to gather these things. That's why we say start early. In order to do that, one of the things that I will highlight, as I've said before, is you will need to upload your mentoring trauma-based curriculum, your job descriptions, any or all linkage or member of understanding. If you are going to use a CPS space to do programming, whether that's in school or out of school, you do need to attach a CPS vendor commitment or letter of intent from the school principal as part of your application. Once again, we have the budget forms for those sorts of things, but we want to ensure that you understand for every application, every one of these attachments are required. Next slide. Basis of award, once again, DFSS will consider additional factors in selecting beyond scoring to ensure system level needs are met. That we want to be transparent about our process and what that looks like. So for example, we will be looking at things like traditional in-school mentoring programs, geography, program hours, so in-school versus out of school. We're going to look at need. We're going to determine those things based on that. Ability to serve specific subpopulations, as we've indicated. We will make recommendations for contract award within each health equity zone, balancing program location, target population, program hours, and age groups. Hence why your application needs to be as strong and transparent and consistent about these issues within your application so that we can be able to make very clear decisions based on those things. Program hours. DFSS requires respondents to offer programming year-round, including during the summer months. Once again, this is not optional. We are not running a traditional academic school year program. This is a 45-hour program that needs to happen and has to include summer months. Programs can occur during in-school or out-of-school hours, including evenings and weekends. Selection and transition time. Once again, we're doing this proposal webinar today. Your application is due October 12th, 2022. Your program period starts January 1, 2023. Next slide. Once again, applications are due October 12th at noon. We keep saying this because we do not want to have to experience any, and this will happen, is the system will cut you off and you will not be able to upload your application, and we will not be able to take your application by email or in any other way. And so one of your requirements in order to for this is to demonstrate your ability to meet the deadline. And so I just want to be transparent about that, because we want everyone to have equal access and be able to apply, but we also want people to understand that the system, not us, the system will cut you off if you, and will not allow you to upload your application if it is 12:01 and you are still trying to upload your application. It will be considered, it will not go through. We're gonna stop here to take questions that are programmatic.
We have so many questions. It's awesome.
I know.
I love the questions, and I also love the fact that one of the questions is, why is Monica so awesome? Which has got to be the best webinar question I have
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So
I just
Monica
wanted
has
to jump.
answered so many of these questions already, but just to give
do you want me to read through them?
We could read through them dramatically or not dramatically, but I think we should at least.
I think that's good, Lisa, if you want to go ahead and do that, and I'll continue to answer.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
so we can go with, here's the first is, can youth with a mental health diagnosis be part of the underserved youth? Our answer is 70% of your enrolled youth must come from the targeted populations that is in this RFP. The other 30% is up to you, but you had talked about, Lisa, earlier in the webinar, the list of what the ADA considers a disability.
Yes. And I'm happy, I can't multitask right now because I haven't had enough coffee. But I did, and I have a presentation from the Mayor's Office of People with Disability. I'm happy to, when we do the amendment, I'm happy to drop the definition of disability that they define and then type of disability, but I'm happy to go through the list here just since we have so many people on this call. I will read the list if people find that helpful. Cerebral palsy, autism, cognitive disability, deafness, blind, low vision, epilepsy, partial or missing limbs, depression, schizophrenia, traumatic brain injury, deaf or blind, alcoholism, cancer, diabetes, HIV/AIDS, multiple sclerosis, orthopedic, paralysis, speech impairment, and autism, and asthma. That is the list provided by the Mayor's Office of People with Disabilities and by the ADA. We will also add that to the amendment. So, so I just want to be explicit here. Thank you, Monica, for answering the question. We had this question the other day, so this is good prep.
So here we have, what services are available to participants when they are not engaged in our mentoring activities, and how will that data impact the results of our programming? So what we've said thus far is, depending on where the youth live and attend school, there are youth services across the city, and it depends on the needs of the interest of the youth. Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I think the biggest thing we want people to understand is youth voice is really critical. So we don't want people to be out here forcing people into programs they don't want to be in, but we also have a very robust array of programming within the city. So between programming offered at CPS, between our own enrichment programs, which I think are amazing, I might be biased, and our employment programs, and even within the P&I portfolio, I think there's an array of those. And so I think if there is really a young person who clearly this is not a match, I think part of the responsibility of being a good youth advocate is being able to put them in the right program at the right time. And you can then just, once again, and then I think one of the things we've said is like it's just a 90% recruitment portion of that you've met that requirement at any time. We anticipate that young people will fall off. That's where the recruitment piece will be really critical. So, but we don't want young people to be suffering in a mentoring program that they don't want to be in. And it won't cost against you. I think the issue is, how did you transition that young person, and then how are you able to then bring in another young person into that slot? I hope that's helpful.
What are professional development opportunities available from DFSS? I think this answer says it all in terms of, we offer an array of training and youth development, but nothing is final as of today.
Correct.
A follow-up question to the first one: why aren't youth with a mental health diagnosis included as underserved youth?
I think people should look once again at the type of disabilities. I think this is where we're asking people to do a little bit of research about the populations, but within the cognitive disability frame. So, and once again, we've also listed particular diagnoses. Once again, I didn't list them. This is from the ADA has listed them. We strongly encourage people to look through the ADA requirement to see. I don't want people to assume that young people aren't included or not in here. I think there's a wide array within the youth with disability field that people will find may meet the needs for young people.
How long is the contract, and do you have to reapply at the end of each contract? So I can address that. The standard city or the standard sort of delegate agency contract, which is the kind of contract that this department does, is a 2-year contract with a potential for a 1-year extension, which is pending per availability of funds and the performance of the individual contractor or delegate agency. After that, yes, you're always going to have to reapply. And this is something that we see frequently with some of our more long-standing or long-funded programs, where people somehow or agencies somehow believe that since they got one contract, that they get that contract sort of in perpetuity. They don't. You get every 2 or 3 years, and it's usually 3 years, we are going to re-release the RFP for that program to allow new people to apply, and that means existing contractors have to reapply because we don't have an ever expanding pot of money for any given contract, as much as we would like. So that would be, so I would say yes, and just as a general operating principle, keep on top of your contract dates because that money will run out. And I see every year a couple of people who miss a date and kind of end up defunding themselves unexpectedly because they did not understand that it is a contract with a beginning and an end. Here is can you define an option school? Our agency is involved with alternative public schools. So as Monica stated, alternative schools are option schools, but would you like to add to either Monica or Lisa or Don, do you have anything to add to the definition option school?
No, just that make sure that if that is if you are checking to see what schools are option schools or alternative schools, the official name is option schools, is to check the Chicago Public School website, and they have a list of the schools and by type as well. Just so if people are looking to do that, there's, I just want to be clear that so Chicago Public Schools has a list of all of their option schools online.
What do you have data that shows where to recruit youth?
I think Monica responded. We strongly suggest partnerships within the RFP as well. Yes. So once again, we listed within the RFP and on the webinar today, all of the places that we know you can meet and exceed the 70%. And within the RFP, this is on page 12 on my copy, but this is under the program requirements section at the bottom. And it lists all of those as well. So this is going to be a huge part of people's ongoing insurance for around data is their ability to recruit and retain young people. So I definitely suggest that people spend some time reviewing the ones we've recommended here. Once again, these are the ones that we recommended that we know you're going to be able to connect with the population, but it's not an exhaustive list. So you can go outside of that, but this is where we know for sure that we want to be able to see that people have a relationship with these entities for recruitment.
Are we able to implement more than one type of program? For example, if we have the capacity to serve different youth groups, i.e. youth with disabilities plus homeless youth, the short answer to that is yes. And
the short answer.
Yep.
Oh, go ahead.
No,
I was going to say yes, and you don't. They can yes. I mean, they could yes, and I think it's. I think, and I guess I want to be clear. You can do a mentoring program that serves a multitude of young people within that. So it's not, unless it's by age, then we do definitely want to see those age appropriate attached by curriculum. So I just want to be clear about that as well. But yes. I know, Julia, if you have anything to add.
No, the thing is, I guess this will come in when I talk more about how to actually make your applications in the e-procurement environment. We're going to talk about, like, if you have to make multiple applications, which you will if you're going to serve different age groups. But that's really the only reason you're going to be making multiple applications for this, that you will need to set up two, unique user accounts within your iSupplier account to make those applications. You can't use the same user account to make two applications. You'll just keep writing over the other application.
Yeah.
That's a problem that I see every once in a while. So here's 5 hours a month all year. Wouldn't that be a minimum of 60 hours rather than 45? And it's the answer was the mentoring RFP does not mandate 5 hours a month. It's 45 hours annually. So that's an important distinction. that your loading plan does not have to be monthly. It has to be an annual, right?
Yep.
Can you clarify, okay, we already talked about clarifying what options schools were. Can volunteer mentors be included in the staff to student ratio? Say 1 full-time staff member, part-time mental health provider, and 15 to 30 volunteer mentors. Volunteer mentors can be included as long as there are appropriate contracts and requirements in place.
Mm-hmm.
Can one staff person serve 30 youth so long as each group program does not include more than 15 youth to one staff person and each youth receives 45 hours of mentoring? The answer, yes, this is a group cohort, 15 youth per group, but one worker can work with 30 separate, not 30 groups, 30 separate youth, right?
Correct. And can I say something before we move on to the next one? Oh, can you guys hear me? Did I lose people?
No, I hear you, Lisa.
Okay.
I think we lost Julia.
We might have lost Julia. Okay. When we go, I want to be clear, if people are going to leverage volunteers, the one thing, and this is just from past history, the one thing that I want to be clear of is you are responsible for ensuring that you are doing ongoing training and professional development with them. That is your role as bringing on people, including your staff. So I want to be clear, we will provide ongoing support, professional development, and training, but you cannot rely on us to be the only way that those folks are getting support. You have to be able to demonstrate what are you doing to ensure that if you're bringing on volunteers, that they are being youth-centric in their thought pattern, that they have some youth development background, that they understand the protocols around safety and security of young people. All of those things still apply. So I just want to be clear, if you're bringing on volunteers, you still have to be able to indicate to us what is going to be your onboarding and your ongoing training to ensure that they're able to meet the developmental needs of the young people. I just want to elevate that.
Right, and I just want to this question came up a lot. This is a group cohort mentoring program, not one-on-one.
Correct.
One-on-one hours do not count in with your 45 hours annually.
Correct. So to Teresa's question, yes, that is in the RFP, 2 staff for 30 students. Once again, you can have staff who are managing multiple cohorts, but that is the group structure that is in place. How long is this funding? We answered that one already. What have the performance outcomes been for the last 5 years? Monica, thank you for repurposing. That's a lot of typing, Monica, for that one.
I'm trying.
I know. I was like, y'all got Monica working on this call. In multiple programs are included. I think in the RFP, is it possible the RFP could be rejected if one of the proposed programs is not outlined sufficiently in the proposal, or would the other proposals be considered? Monica answered, I think I'm not really, I want to be clear that we're answering this correctly. You could, you were applying for a mentoring program. You can have mentoring programs within multiple sites within a HEZ, but if you are literally applying for different health equity zones, you have to have a different application. So I want to be clear when you mean multiple programs. You can have a program for, help me out, Monica, 12 to 15, 16 to 17, and 18 to 24,
correct.
all in one application. We're not saying that like you can
Right.
serve all those populations in one application in one healthy equity zone. So
But I think the question was like, can we do 2 different groups? We do the young youth, the young ones, and then the older youth. You could definitely apply for, if you want, 69,000 for the 12 to 15, 69,000 for the 18 to 24, that's fine. But you are going to explain in your application, this is what I'm going to do for this age group, the mentoring program, and this is what I'm going to do for my 18 to 24. Obviously, they're going to be a little bit different
Mhm.
curriculum,
And it's
different,
one, yeah.
and
Mhm.
it's one application as long as it's in the same equity zone.
Yeah, it's one application and it's one budget. I
Right.
want to be clear. It's one application and it's one budget. So if you're going to Monica's point, if you're doing that and say we're in total, we're going to serve 30 of this age and 30 of that, then your application is 60 youth and in the health equity zone. So I just want to be clear. And so we will look at the proposal as a whole. So it's very clear that if you're gonna put different populations within one application, then you need to ensure that there's strength across both programs, because how you're scored is going to be based on, as I said, those selection criteria we've outlined, and it will be a whole score based on the one application. We're not going to as well. So I think that's just something to elevate. But no, thank you for the clarification. Does physical address mean service site address? And John, help me if I get this wrong. So you can have a physical address in the health equity zone, but you may decide that you're going to run your group mentoring program at the library down the street. That's fine. But you have to have a physical address in the service zone, and the services have to happen in the zone.
So I'm going to piggyback on you. I think some folks, because this came up a couple times, for instance, if you are in the North Zone, but your administrative offices are in the South Zone, but all your programming is in the North Zone, and you are working out of schools, you're working out of the library, you're working with another agency at a community center, if that's where your program site and your youth are at and you're operating your mentoring, that's the zone you choose.
Yes.
It does not necessarily have to be your admin office. It has to be your program location, and youth live or go to attend school in that zone.
Yes, and
I
you
hope
just have
that's
to be
clear.
no 100%. And once again, I think you have to be explicit in your application questions as to why you chose that zone and that you can serve that zone.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
Can you guys hear me yet?
Oh, now we can.
Great.
We're still going through. We're just making sure that we go through everything.
Oh yeah, I've been listening.
Okay, we did the physical address. We addressed the 45 hours already. What if you have two different programs? We already addressed that one for one at 12 and one at 20 in the same zone. We did that. I'm just going to run through here and see is there anything that we didn't answer. Okay, for the requirements that the respondents have a physical address and equity zone, we just talked about that. If a we just talked about that. If you're going to however that is, once again, just being really explicit. If you're going to use a subcontractor, making sure that you're very explicit, and we ask that you be very explicit if you are using subcontractors in your responses as well. But this goes back to what Monica just said. You just have to be able to show that you can serve youth in that zone.
Can funds be used to pay youth stipends?
You know, I guess my question is, you have to justify why you need a youth stipend. People are often really quick to do stipends, and I guess my question is, you're going to have to justify age appropriately the need for a stipend. And how that meets the goal. So once again, this goes back to goal. How does that help meet the overall goal of this program, which is a positive relationship with a mentor, creating safe spaces, and building on social and emotional competencies? If youth are saying, I really need a job, then that is a youth program. We have an employment program for that. So I want to be clear. And so if you're going to utilize a stipend, I think you have to be very explicit about why a stipend and how it relates back to the overall goals of the RFP. Can we use allowable 15%? I think there's a letter missing here as our 15% income. You can use whatever you want as your match. We don't stipulate the funding source. You just have to be explicit about what it is and how and where it's going to be applied in the 15%. I think it's IDOC, but I'm not sure. I think there's a letter missing. On the application, it has at least 2 options for potential program sites. Can we add a site for South and West Side just in case they get denied? Once again, this is by health equity zones. And so if you gotta pick the zone, if the site is not in the same zone, then you have to do 2 separate applications.
Lisa, can I add to that?
Yep.
If there are more than 2 program sites in a particular equity zone, then you should submit a listing of program sites with other documents that are updated.
Correct. Yes. Thank you, John. And that is something that is mentioned in the document page. That if you are going to have, and I think it's one of the questions we ask up front, if you're going to have as well, but if you can do that. But if you're saying South and West, based on this application, they may not fall in the same zone. If they don't fall in the same zone, then you have to do a separate application for each of those zones, for each of those areas. Do you have to be a Chicago agency? No, you do not. But you have to be able to, I want to be clear, all youth, this is a citywide program and all youth must be from the city. We have very clear information within our RFP about who is an eligible respondent to this application. And I'm gonna find you the page so everybody can see it. To Monica's point earlier, this is about being able to provide services in the health equity zone that you choose and being able to provide a site address in those areas. So for respondents, just to ensure that people understand what the structure is on that, that is under section 3 about what those respondents can be. And then also, let me make sure, I think it's in another place as well. It's also under section 2, eligibility, evaluation, and selection. Under eligible respondents, it's a very long list about who is eligible to apply for this RFP. So I just will refer people to that page. Section 2, eligibility, evaluation, and selection procedure, eligible respondents, which is letter A. What else? Is that everything?
Standards that or guides that define age-appropriate curricula.
So in the RFP at the very end, we list sort of, once again, just a guide of some recommended best practice curriculums, and some of them are and age appropriate. It's an attachment to the RFP.
Then let's see, it's $2,300 for youth in a 2-year period. So it's, yes, is it $2,300 for youth in a 1-year period? So I think your contract is going to be $69,000 annually, and I believe that would work out to $2,300 for youth for each year. Correct?
Yeah. You can apply for as many youth as you want. 69 is the basic, and that's just for 30 youth. But
yeah, that's the minimum.
That's the minimum.
So
minimum.
You're not applying for 15 youth, you're applying for 30 youth.
Yeah.
And then if you want to apply for more, it's 15 youth in increments. So if you're like, oh, I want to do 45, you got to do it in increments of 15. So if you want to do a little more than 30, it's got to be 45 youth, and so on.
Can you explain the in-kind match? I can. It's in the
in-kind match is basically the services or resources that you are leveraging, but that are not being paid for by this program's funding. So, for instance, you could, I believe, as an allowable cost, include a portion of your rent as an allowable cost associated with this program, or because your rent is being paid ostensibly by somebody, you could include your rent as an indication of in-kind match. Would that be a sufficient example.